everyone, I'm Priya, CFRE's Media Director, and today we'll be speaking to Elena Erin. So, I read that you were homeschooled in a strict religious environment where pop music was forbidden. So I'm wondering how this upbringing influenced the person and artist you are today.
Yeah, I was born in northern BC, and my parents never let me listen to pop music. I think it made me like very hungry for pop music. So while a lot of people were like, "That's surface level music, it's basic," my perspective of it was, "Oh, this is so cool that you can maybe only hear like 30 seconds of it at a grocery store, and you suddenly feel like you know the song instantly," and it felt like so accessible. So I've always thought there's something like so like universal about just like pop music, which obviously shifts during generations and time and everything. Um, but that, and then I think also the person I am, as far as like learning how to write while not being able to listen, trying to write pop music while not being able to listen to it, I think it made me create my own ways of writing, my own ways of saying things that were maybe not so like generic or something that probably sounded very alternative, and I was like, this is pop. But forced me to tell my story in a very specific way, I suppose.
That's very interesting. So you had like an outsider's perspective to like a whole industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in my opinion, I think you have a very distinct brand. So the question must be asked, who and what inspires you to create?
Ooh. I would say, while I can list so many artists, I think this idea of like myself as the kid in the environment I was in, that whenever I was slowly able to get my hands on certain music, I'd like have it in my Discman, and you're like driving out in the wilderness or like doing stuff. I just remember sitting in the back of the vehicle and like sneaking music for myself when I was like able to like burn my own CDs. Um, and I think of like how much that music impacted me, and the idea of writing that kind of music that some other person has on their repeat one, that is telling their story in a way that maybe they've never felt their story was told before or recognized. I think that really inspires me and keeps me going. And then also whenever I see an artist like doing something that is not considered like mainstream or acceptable in the industry, I think that's so inspiring. Like I think I'm like, cool, we can like do different things in our approach.
Do you have an example of an artist that like did something kind of different?
Yeah, I think somebody I go to a lot regarding like how they set up their career maybe is Russ. I think he's an amazing artist as far as like how he's approached releasing his music. I remember in 2016 I had just graduated school, moved to New York, and I was listening to an interview with him, and he was like taking off. He was like doing quite well. And he was saying how, first of all, like the music industry is fake. None of this idea that like, oh, somebody signs a label and suddenly they're like rich and famous. No, no, no. And he was saying how like he had, first of all, he was like, I didn't have the resources to create my own music, so I learned it all myself. And then he was like, I think he said either that he had like put out 10 albums or something like that on SoundCloud. And I remember thinking like, that's insane, that's crazy. And then I was like, okay, well, cool, if he's doing that, like that isn't that insane. I shouldn't be like putting out 3 songs and wondering why it hasn't blown up yet. Like follow that. And then I think like Sevdaliza is an artist that I've always just loved her approach to everything. um yeah, I could go on listing many, but
So I've listened to a bunch of your music, and again, in my opinion, I think like they're very cohesive, but like to you, but then they all kind of sound different and unique, but again, to your brand. How do you
Mhm.
accomplish this?
So I also like work with other artists with songwriting, and a lot of times I hear artists say like, "Oh, these songs sound so different," and I'm like, maybe they do in a way, but like at the end of it all, like you are the core person, but everything's getting filtered through you. So
Mhm.
even if you're like, I'm gonna create 2 drastically different things, they're still gonna be filtered through you, and they're gonna sound similar enough. So actually, I would say a lot of what I do is try to create very, very different things. And then it kind of comes, so I'll be like, I'm going to tell this in this completely different story, or I heard this artist and it inspired me, or I watched this movie and it inspired me. Let me do something that doesn't really feel like me, but it's still me doing it, so it's gonna end up being filtered through that and like still sound, yeah, related.
What kind of movies inspire you since you brought that up?
Ooh, so to be honest with you, I don't really watch a ton of movies anymore, and when I do, it's like either like a random one that I'll like watch at a theater, or I don't even know if I can name them because it's like I'll be at a friend's place and they're like put on a movie or something. And I think what it is a lot of times isn't necessarily the specific like movie plot line or character or anything, but like the emotion that comes up or suddenly like resonating with that or resonating with enough of what this character is experiencing
Mhm.
and kind of writing from that perspective. And even there's something like that can be so epic about movies that even I was writing this song the other day and all I could think of is like the movie it's gonna be in. Not in the fact like, oh, it's gonna be in a movie, ooh, but like, oh, this feels like it's like I can like see the movie play out of what the song is trying to convey.
Yeah, and so you're like a visual kind of thinker, which makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So your latest single, Sick Rich Girl, is a mix of electro, dark dance, pop. How did you
Hmm.
decide on the sound? Because when I heard it, I was like, this is so cool and like great. But like I never would have been able to just like if you told me to describe the song, I don't know, like I don't know if I could have put that into.
So you'll probably hear right after the chorus, you hear the second chorus, you hear this little guitar sample, this like just guitar on its own. And I actually wrote the whole song over that. And what happened, I was working with my producer who was in France at the time. He had just moved back to France. And we had kind of been working virtually, had got all these songs selected, kind of were like working on a few different songs. And I was going to go there to record. And I think this was like the night before I left. I was like, I'm going to stay up till like 4 a.m. working on music, getting inspired. And I had found that sample just of that guitar, of like the da 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 da, whatever, drug it in and wrote the song over that. And I was like, oh, this is an interesting song. Like everything was kind of pieced together in little ways. And I wrote the whole song just over this loop. Like it's just written over a guitar loop. Took it to the producer along with some other ones and we're like, what are your thoughts? And he was like, this is good. This is a good one. I really like this. And generally I'll make up my own rough demos of like, this is how I want it to sound. And it's kind of like you get the idea of it, but it's not like fully executed. I'm not like a producer yet on my own. And so then I'll say like sit with somebody and say, here's what I want it to sound like, describe the sounds, we work together to make it happen. And he listened and was like, can I try something crazy? Like, can I just try something, give me 20 minutes, and then you can be like, no, 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 we're starting from scratch again without that. But he's like, I really just want to throw this like I want it to feel like a big and harsh and like this like big beat in there. And I was like, yeah, cool. That's what the album was missing. I was like, I need something that's like the giving it the grit that is supposed to
That's
feel
what I liked
good.
about it. Like it's like
Hmm.
I don't know, I just like how I describe it as like in your face, you know? Like
Yeah,
that.
that's a great, yeah, that's what I wanted to feel like. And I felt like even the lyrics were kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of like messy, or I feel like I was like, I'd feel like embarrassed to perform this in front of my parents or like people I know, which I feel like that means like, cool,
It's
there's something there
good.
that's like, So I was like, okay, let's get the grit with it. And so that was really cool. And he was like, okay, what do you think about this beat? And then from there, we just built the whole thing up. And then, yeah, for the bridge idea too, we were like, let's just make it. I think I had a bridge written, and we were like, let's just take it out and like just kind of keep it this like screaming upscale vibe and like go, 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 go. So, yeah.
Honestly, it kind of reminded me of like Alessia Cara's song Here, but like angry. I don't know if that makes
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's actually very interesting. I would have never thought of that. But like, I see what you're going. Like, I get the. I feel like if we were at a party, she'd be
yeah.
on one side, being like with the stoner kids singing that song, and I'd be on the other side with like these like rich New York people singing my song. And then years later, we'd be like, "Why didn't we see each other at that party?" And we are like, "Oh, we were just resonating in different circles, you know."
So I wanted to ask, would you ever do a music video for Sick Rich Girls, or is that in the works?
So I made a lot of this because I have this whole album coming out
Mhm.
next spring. I've been making a lot of like visuals for it rather than just music videos. And a lot of them have just been like, you can see that kind of for the past two songs, just like visuals of kind of me performing the song or some visuals that kind of set the tone for the song. And I thought like I'd rather have, rather than like one or two music videos off the album, kind of spread the budget and just like spread the time into making like some visuals for all the songs. That being said, the ideas I have with this song, it's like maybe like a perfectionist thing of I've got so many ideas, things I want to do, and so I need to find, I can't just do like a boring visual for this one. Not that the others are boring, but like I can't just do like me singing one take. Like I'm like, no, there's so many good like beats and rhythm in here that everything needs to be synced with it and aligned. So yeah, if you know any good videographers or any creatives who are like, we want to create something, send them my way because I'm
For
very into
sure.
it.
So going back to that song, in my opinion, I kind of felt like before I read like your meaning, I thought it was like a commentary on society and how like
Mhm.
things that are supposed to make us happy, like don't always make us happy and they kind of leave us empty. Would you
Mhm.
agree with this statement? And can
Uh,
listeners expect a similar commentary on your upcoming album?
Yeah, 100%. I think it is like a commentary on the world and maybe through my lens, but like 100%, that's exactly what it is saying. Um, I think it's very easy for us to look at the world around us and be like, society sucks, but like forget that we are society and we are part of that
Yeah.
all. Right. And so I think what I was really trying to do with the album and with the songs coming up on it is like maybe talk about things outside of me that feel horrible, but then be like, rather than like preaching at people like, this is a horrible thing in the world, we're all like, yeah, we can relate to that. But then when you're like, this is my part in the horrible thing in the world, not that you're doing anything wrong, but just like this is how we're
Yeah.
experiencing it. I feel like that kind of like humanizes it. And also when we have responsibility for that, then you can kind of change it, right? So like um I think that was kind of my approach. And I would say that does follow throughout the rest of the album. I would say the rest of the album gets more like introspective. Like it dives, I feel like this might be like a more commentary on a more like gritty commentary on certain things. And then other songs are a bit of a commentary, but like dive very, very deep into like my personal experiences within that, which I think in a way, the more personal you get, the more people can relate. Not
Yeah.
because they necessarily had the same personal experiences, but because they're like, oh, cool, you're going to go really deep. I can feel that depth. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting because I've always liked political punk, but like this kind of reminded me of like a political kind of punk sound, but like you're not really necessarily bringing up politics. Again, it's more of an
Mhm.
individual experience. And because
Yeah.
like this is such a like I guess like a common experience that everyone goes through, it was just like I found such a good like critique. Like the next time I go to a party, like I'm gonna be thinking about it.
Oh, yay, that makes me so happy. Thank you. No, I really appreciate that description. Thank you. I, yeah, I think that was a lot of like, there is a lot of that in this whole album. But I guess it's like the whole idea that like, not the whole idea. I think there's change and like how the world works can happen on so many different levels. And I think for me, it's definitely been like, let's look at your part in whatever the whole world is and like dive really deeply and like how can you just change this little like bubble around yourself and
Yeah.
then let that expand versus like, oh, I'm going to go to the top and change that or this. So yeah.
I think the timing was really like well thought of too, because if you did this during COVID, like I'm not really sure like how that would have been because people weren't really going out and like socializing.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
now that we're like kind of back to normal, like it makes so much sense. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, but like
It wasn't. These all kind of like these songs. I started writing them like kind of right after COVID times. So it wasn't intentional, but that is a great thought as well. Because it's easy to be like, why didn't I come up with this a few years ago and really? Why didn't I go faster with my releases and get everything going? So yeah, it is good timing. Yeah.
so could you tell me a little bit more about your upcoming album, Roaring Twenties?
So the album is it's called Roaring Twenties, and the whole idea was like this whole Gatsby-ish type 20s vibe. Anyone who's watched like The Great Gatsby or I guess read
Yes.
the book, that vibe of everything of like you kind of have this like there's no limit, this insane like wealth around us and parties and everything like that. And yet there's this huge divide. It's like these people who are like living really well and then like the rest of society, but like this like lower class society, and also that the people at the top are also just like so disconnected from what they really want and love and makes them happy. Like they're like huge parties, huge everything, but it's like, oh, I actually just want to be like, even in Gatsby's case, like accepted and loved by this girl, or like accepted into a class that rejected me, or like says that I'm not good enough for whatever system they're using. Um, so I was like, from that perspective, we are kind of like in a world that someday somebody's gonna look back and be like, what a weird dystopian like world they were living in, what was going on. So from that perspective, I was like, imagine being at this insane party. It's like a Great Gatsby party. And they walk up to like one of the random women there and start talking with her and are like, so how did like, and she's maybe just like standing by a table looking a bit miserable. That's the whole like sick rich girl vibe, right? That you're looking around and you're like commenting on everybody, but then you're also like, well, I'm here. I'm attending the party as well. Like I'm as much like in this as everybody else. And then the album follows her leaving this party and on her way home, suddenly reflecting just on the past few years, also how she got there, also the root of everything, like her just doing like a deep analysis on herself. Um, and so it becomes like very introspective, but all of it is set in this like, when I refer to certain things, it's all within this like little era that I've created for the album. So, yeah.
So you mentioned like thinking like I guess like in the future, people looking back on us. Is that something like common that you do with songwriting? Like, do you think about how future generations are going to reflect on your music? Because that's really interesting.
I have said things that I would say like consider shocking to myself, or like, oh my god, when people hear this, they're gonna be like, mm. And I'm actually surprised, maybe because my stuff hasn't like reached mass level yet, that like there hasn't been people to be like, but like I don't know, even my parents, I'm like, ooh, that people haven't had the negative response I thought they would have, or the shocked response. They're more like, I really relate to this, or like I think that's an amazing commentary. And I more so like, I think about artists like, I don't know, even look at like Sinead O'Connor, that people were like, we're gonna ban you, you're like, we're not having anything to do with you, you're radical, you're all these things that now we would consider, I mean, in certain countries, a basic human right, right? Or just like, this is just like obviously wrong, and this is right, and this is not okay, or this is okay, right? And like at that period, people considered her to be radical, right? And I think artists, by creating something, you're like, I'm going to create a world that I actually want to live in, and sometimes that's considered radical. And so I think in that terms, yes, artists might be like ahead of the times or creating something that seems fictional, but it's just like, no, we're just creating what one day people will be like, oh yeah, we relate to this, and this is how the world is now.
Okay, so going off your upcoming album, besides that, what's next for you, or what do you have planned for in the new year?
Ooh, so I have a few more singles going to be coming out before the whole album release, and these ones are diving more into like the love side of things, and not in terms of like love songs, but more like dissecting love in society, I suppose, and love within myself. And I'm really excited for those songs to come out. And I'm going to be doing a tour throughout Canada in the spring, which I'm really excited for. I've kind of been, though I was born and raised in Canada and like lived there till I was 19, I then have been now like in New York or in London or kind of like all over. So I'm really excited to like be back home for a chunk of time. And actually like, yeah, connect and play music with like for fellow Canadian audiences. So that's going to be coming up. Hopefully some festivals as well in the summer. And yeah, and then maybe more music videos. Like maybe you're going to connect me with somebody and they're going to be like, I got the video idea, and then that'll be out. So
That's very exciting. Is there a specific place in Canada you're looking like the most forward to?
I am excited to, I think, play shows in Calgary because, oh no, you know what? Okay, yes, Calgary, because I used to live there for a bit, and then also Vancouver. But as somebody who's lived in New York a long time and in London in the UK, whenever I tell people I'm from Canada, they're like, oh, I love Toronto. And I'm like, I've never been. This is so embarrassing, but I've only flown through Toronto because I'd always go straight to New York or Boston. And so I'm like, I'm a bad Canadian. I don't even know, like, the top place in my country. I was like, never been, can't say, can't comment, sorry. So I'm actually really excited to come there, do shows, meet people, actually be able to be like, oh yeah, I know what Toronto's like.
Check it off the bucket list.
Exactly. Be like fully certified Canadian.
Well, that's all I really had for today. Thank you for joining us. Again, I'm Priya on CFRE Radio, and we'll see you next time.